Hello, brovs. We're back with The Seven Deadly Sins. 7 British authors write on the 7 Deadly Sins. The foreword by Ian Fleming. We've already done the chapter on envy, I believe, which was the first one. Yes. Maybe not. We'll see. Pride is the second one, page 14. Pride. Edith Sitwell, I believe her. She was a dame, Edith Sitwell. Pride has always been one of my favorite virtues. I have never regarded it, except in certain cases, as a major sin. Owing to a gradual debasement, a weakening of language, certain words do not, at this time, bear their original meaning. The word pride is sometimes used when what is meant is a silly, useless vanity, nor have I an affection for a pride which is simply the result of obstinacy. There is, of course, a deadly sin of pride, that which caused Hitler to say, "I walk with the certainty of the somnambulist," but there is also the pride which can yet inspire love and admiration, such as Dante felt for his dear former tutor, Brunetto Latini, said Professor Jacques Maritain in that great book, Creative Intuition in Art and Poetry, who even in hell seemed like him who wins and not him who loses. Such was the tragic grandeur of that first archetype of pride, the paragon of all creation, who, of the light impatient, fell unripe. Dante Paradiso X1X, which I think is 19? A very great man, one of the greatest of our time, is reputed, I do not know with how much truth, to have said that his political opponents, who simply would not move and get out of the way, but persisted in being hearted limpets. I hope he said it. If he did not, he deserved to have said it, for the description could not be bettered. I've never been a limpet, lion-hearted or otherwise. My pride, which is great, is not of the kind that forbids me to move from any untenable position. I have never minded being laughed at. All original artists are laughed at, but sometimes I laugh back, and that is not appreciated. When I was a very young woman, I sat to Roger Fry, a most delightful man, for several portraits. Our appearance as we crossed from his studio to his house for luncheon caused a certain amount of interest. Roger wore, over his bushy gray hair, a very wide felt hat. I wore a leaf green evening dress, with the result that the younger members of the crowd, surveying us, inquired, "Where did you get that hat? Where did you get that tile? Does your mother know you're out?" And finally suggested, benevolently, that a certain day in November would have been a more suitable day for our appearance. Apropos of this date in November, my grandmother, Lady Londesborough, a most formidable lady, was the centerpiece of one of the worst falls from pride that I remember. It happened on that auspicious day, the 5th of November. My grandfather was sitting in a bath chair, surrounded by captive daughters outside the gate of the Londesborough Lodge Gardens. A young curate approached, accompanied by his wife, or is it a curate? Struck by my grandmother's remarkable appearance and remembering the date, he placed 2 pennies in her lap and made his way into the gardens, which were private. The gift was not appreciated. In fact, there was an appalling storm, and the donor was chased by footmen through the gardens. I have always enjoyed those frequent occasions on which I have been put in a place that is not mine. When I was about 22 years old, I went to a house belonging to some very rich people in order to play the accompaniments on the piano for Helen Rudham, an admirable musician who had been engaged to sing at an afternoon party. When the music was over, I was hastily removed from the drawing room, as it was not thought suitable that I should have tea with gentry. The butler advanced upon me. "Follow me, if you please, miss," and I found myself in a small room where, I must admit, a most delicious tea was awaiting me. Everything that a girl of 22 would enjoy most meringues, chocolate eclairs, etc. Of these I ate a great many. Then the butler reappeared, and I was led back into the drawing room in order to accompany Helen on her farewell tour of the gentry. There were a few moments of desultory conversation before the farewells were over. "I do hope," said my hostess's daughter, "that Lady Londesborough is going to invite me to her ball." Lady Londesborough was the wife of my mother's brother, and was at that time one of the most important London hostesses. "I'll remind her," I said. "Lord Londesborough is my uncle, and I am staying with them at the moment." There was a short silence, then we said goodbye. I've never seen any of the gentry since. It is sad when one's pride, which may be a form of love, perhaps one of the highest forms of love, receives a fall. When I was 4 years old, before the birth of either of my brothers, my pride and love were concentrated on the Renishaw peacock. This love was, at the moment, returned. Every morning, punctually at 9 o'clock, it is strange how birds and animals have an accurate sense of time. The peacock would stand on the leads outside my mother's bedroom, waiting for me to come and say good morning to her. When he saw me, he would let out a harsh shriek of welcome. I do not, as a rule, appreciate ugly voices, but I loved him so much that in this case I did not care. He would wait until I left my mother's room, and then, with another harsh shriek, would fly down into the garden to wait for me. We would walk round and round the large garden, not arm in arm, since that was impossible, but side by side with my arm round his lovely shining neck. If it had not been for his crown, which made him slightly taller than me, we should have been of exactly the same size. My nurse said to me, "Why do you love Peaky so much?" I replied, "Because he is beautiful and wears a heavenly crown." "The pride of the peacock," wrote William Blake, "is the glory of God." This lovely, innocent romance lasted for months. Then my father found Peaky a wife, after which he never looked at me, but occupied himself completely with teaching his children to unfurl the fans with which they had been endowed for tails. I do not think it was the injury to my pride, being jilted by a peacock, that I minded. It was the injury to my affections. True pride has no connection with the stupid vanity of the person who believes the world was created for his convenience, or to prove some theory of his. "I am afraid, sir," said the young author in Lavengro, "it was very wrong to write such trash, and yet more to allow it to be published." "Trash, not at all," replied his publisher. "A very pretty piece of speculative philosophy. Of course you were wrong in saying there is no world. The world must exist to have the shape of a pear, and that the world is shaped like a pear and not like an apple, as the fools of Oxford say, I have satisfactorily proved in my book. Now, if there were no world, what would become of my system? Incidentally, if I remember rightly, in the first 5 books of America, we read that at one moment Christopher Columbus believed the world was shaped like a pear. It's a rhombus. In Mr. Malcolm Letz's remarkable book about the real or imaginary Sir John Mandeville, he speaks of the belief held by medieval geographers that Jerusalem was the center of the earth. Mandeville was concerned about the antipodes because of the suggestion by the supporters of the flat earth theory that if, in fact, the earth were a sphere, the men on the sides and lower surface would be living sideways or upside down, even if they did not fall off into space. As Mandeville implies, if a man thinks he is walking upright, he is in fact walking the right way up, as God meant him to do, and that is all that matters. This delightful suggestion seems to me to hold endless possibilities for the exercise of pride and also conceit. There is also a want of proper pride, which is ugly and evil, and ugly humility. Blake said modesty is only the cloak of pride. I regard with disfavor the natural crawler, persons like the North American Indian who, according to Charleston's History de la Nouvelle France, was found fondling a dead mouse in the hope of appeasing the genius of mice. Whatever that means. When, after the serpent's intolerable interference in the Garden of Eden, The Lord God said to him, Upon thy belly shalt thou go. Surely the serpent was being condemned to an ugly form of humility. I despise anything which reduces the pride of man. In January 1959, I read in a daily paper that in a certain town, a plan to lock a man in a cage for 8 days and put him in a show in a public park as the carnival feature is to be put before the health committee. He would stay in the 12 feet by 12 feet cage day and night, the town's carnival committee was told. The carnival committee's secretary said, We are looking for a volunteer who will play the part of a human ape. We will offer him a gratuity of 25 pounds plus food. I think that's pounds. During the 8 days and nights he will lie in the cage. Feeding times will be posted up outside the cage as in a zoo. I find it difficult to express my feelings about this hideous debasement of the pride of mankind. We may remember also the praise bestowed upon an actress in America, of whom a critic wrote, Now I'm saying she will be the sensation of New York. She walked off the stage on all fours with elbows and knees straighter than pokers. Is it really necessary to walk on all fours? We should, like Goethe, I know I'm saying it wrong, Goethe, regard man as the first conversation that nature holds with God. And if this does not give us proper pride, we deserve to go with the gait of the serpent. Pride may be my own besetting sin, but it is also my besetting virtue. I take pride in the glory of mankind, and it would please me to think that, like the horse of which God spoke to Job, my neck is clothed with thunder. Wycliffe dwarfed this in his translation down to don about his neck with nine. Certainly, my life has been spent in saying, ha ha ha, among the trumpets. Proper pride is a necessity to an artist in any of the arts. Only this will save an artist's work and his private life from the attacks and intrusions made on these by those unfortunate persons who have been unable to attract attention to themselves except by incessant bawling. Alexander Pope wrote in a letter, I will venture to say that no man ever rose to any degree of perfection in writing, but through obstinacy and an inveterate resolution against the stream of mankind, so that if the world has received any benefit from the labors of the learned, it was in its own despite. For when first they essay their parts, all people in general are prejudiced against new beginners. And when they have got a little above contempt, then some particular persons who were before unfortunate in their own attempts are sworn foes to them only because they succeed. Socrates said to some carping person, I would rather die having spoken in my manner than speak in your manner and live. This is the proper pride of the artist. Iago is, I think, the greatest epitome of all literature of wicked pride. This is his element, his climate, his eternity, the whole of his being. If of that which the heart is mine is feeling one drop were to fall into hell, hell itself would become all life eternal. Thus spoke St. Catherine of Genoa. The life eternal is union with God. One drop from the pride of Iago would raise all hell to rebellion against God. But that drop from the pride of Iago would come from a heart that had no feeling. He would indeed hardly know the difference between those pains and the pleasures of heaven, for he is not a damned soul, he is a devil. Much of Shakespeare is concerned with the humbling of pride, as in certain speeches of Hamlet. A man may fish with the worm that hath eat of a king, and eat of the fish that had fed of that worm. King, what dost thou mean by this? Hamlet, nothing, but to show you how a king may go a progress through the guts of a beggar. But death has its pride as well as its humility. Epicharmus of Syracuse, who was in his prime between 485 and 467 BC, told of a dead man saying, I am a corpse. A corpse is dung, and dung is earth. Earth is a god. Then am I not a corpse, but a god? The greatest poet of our time, W.B. Yeats, writing of pride and humility, said, Oh, what a sweetness strayed through barren Thebaid, I don't know how to say that, or by the Mareotic sea, when the exultant Antony and twice 1,000 more starved upon the shore and withered to a bag of bones. What had the Caesars but their thrones? So far, I am not particularly impressed by this book, to say the least, but I will endure. I will endure for the reading public. I will endure. Covetous is next. Covetousness, the downfall of Jonathan Edex is next. Goodbye, bruv. Goodbye. Goodbye.